Hello. Today in my writing playlist, I'm going to talk about reading lists. And if you haven't seen my previous video about the character folio, it might come in handy. And I also have one before that about bricks. All of those, I think it's best to kind of watch this playlist from the beginning and work your way through. But today I'm going to talk about the reading list. I think when you're talking about a reading list, I actually think it's one of the most important things about writing a novel. If you don't have one, I think you're setting yourself up for a certain amount of failure. The first thing I'm going to say is with your writing, it helps with inspiration and ideas. It can also help improve your writing skills. It can also help you understand the craft better because you are reading other writers and you can see their process in their work. It can help with research and world building. You get ideas from all different places, and this can really help with that. It can also help with your personal growth, just you as a person. The more you read, the more you learn. And it's useful not just for you as a writer, but you as a person. Now, in my reading lists, I often will include a film section and perhaps even a TV section if I can find the right shows. In my novel Dominique's Confession, there were quite a few shows about the 1920s. But in this novel, there aren't that many TV shows about Gnosticism, so I'm mainly having to lean on films. But when you make a films or TV part to your reading list, you can call it a film list, whatever you want. I just combine them into one. The film or TV part helps you with visual storytelling. You can even save clips if it's very specific. It also can help with understanding dialogue and the pacing of it. And not just the pacing of the dialogue, but pacing of the story. The importance of editing and how editing can be played with. If it's a Christopher Nolan film, you know that the editing is very important. Just because it's in a movie doesn't mean you can't do that in a book also. Quentin Tarantino is another example of someone that uses non-sequential or non-linear editing to make the story interesting. But the greatest thing is sort of the cross-pollination of ideas. Just because you're writing a novel doesn't mean you can't get ideas from some other places. So I think all of these are very useful when you're trying to build your reading list. The reason I do this is to kind of keep it fresh in my mind. Eventually I will print this and start kind of crossing things off, but it's something that I can kind of keep looking at. And I think it's important when you're writing a novel to be immersed in it. And what I mean by that is everything that you're kind of reading or watching, experiencing in some ways should be an extension of what you're trying to do with the novel. With my third novel, Dominique's Confession, which was set in the 1920s in Detroit, I had to, because there was so much dialogue and terminology from a different time and also history, I had to really immerse myself in that world in order to kind of effectively pull off the dialogue and also just to know a lot about it. Because, when you're writing about the present, it's easy to draw upon things that are happening in the world. You know everything that's kind of happened in your life with the news and with language. But when you're writing something in a certain time, you definitely need to immerse yourself in it to get the kind of cadence and everything from it. So what I did is I created a list similar to this with books and films and TV shows, trying to kind of get a grasp on it. So for New Eleusis, these are the books that I am reading right now. When I say ongoing, I mean that I've been reading them, and some of these I've been reading for a while. I'm not really the kind of person that just reads one book and then puts it down and picks up the next. I tend to kind of jump around, and I'll be reading 10 books at one time. just because I get kind of bored with just fiction or just research, or I like to kind of mix it up. And so some of these books are related to the story, some are not. Like I'm rereading The Drawing of the Three. I'm going through the whole Dark Tower series because I did a video on it recently and I decided I wanted to go back to it. So I don't know if that's actually bleeding into this writing process, but I'm putting it on here because I'm rereading it, and maybe it will. I don't know. But a lot of the other ones here, I'm maybe halfway or 3/4 through, and then I'm going to move on. I think the next order of business at this point would be the Gnostic research, because there's so much to take in that is going to be part of this story. So I want to kind of get as best of a handle on that as I can. So a lot of these books I'm going to be jumping into next. And then, a lot of this other stuff, this kind of tangential research, are things I'm interested in that I think will define the book to some degree. Every other novel I've written has been very influenced by what I was reading at the time. So like, these are all kind of books that I'm interested in. Some of them I've already started, like The Laws of Human Nature I actually started just recently. But yeah, I mean, some of them are going to be rereads, like The Golden Bough. I want to reread that. And once I get kind of the outlining and the basic structure of the plot done, I'm going to start jumping into books more about the tone, and these will be things that I'll be reading while I'm writing. I think it's good to be reading fiction while you're doing that, because then you can kind of glean ideas or vocabulary or just the general tone of how the authors construct their projects, and also the differences between authors, and see where you kind of lie in there. So as you can see, a lot of these stories are about the uncanny, or magical realism is something I'm interested in. Near the end here, there's a bunch of things about occult investigators, because there is going to be this kind of occult mystery in the story. So I want to jump into those a little more. And near the end here, just things that I think kind of fit the idea of what I'm going for. So I'm going to reread some of these, but also jump on a couple other ones. And then, in my free time, when you're an author, there isn't much free time. But in my free time, when I want to relax and kind of chill out, I'll probably put on a film. And these are films that I either want to rewatch or I haven't seen yet, that I think will influence my story. And some of them are noir, some are works of the uncanny, or they feature doubles. There's some that are kind of like more on the sensual side, or these erotic thrillers, and I just want to kind of immerse myself in that language. So I may not get to all of these films in the time that I write this, but having a list I think is wise, because you never know when you're like, what am I feeling tonight? Well, let's put this on and see what it does. And sometimes you might not get a lot from a film, but you might get one little nugget of something that it's like a eureka moment, and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, that totally fits with my story. Then you can incorporate it. At a later date, I will make a song list. And what I do for this is I usually make a playlist in Spotify that's most of the time instrumental, because I can't really listen to music that has words while I write. It just doesn't work. But I will make a sort of composition playlist. And what that does is it helps me with the tone of my writing. So, for example, I did a horror serial, ebook horror serial last year that I really needed to get into that tone of horror. And so I made this long playlist with like the soundtrack for The Thing and, you know, all these horror movies. But it kind of helps you define your tone better when you're selecting these different songs. Because there were some horror movies I was like, this just doesn't fit with what I'm trying to do. It was either too like ee, or, you know, it just wasn't right. And even though that was audio, it got me into helping fine tune exactly what I was looking for. And I think that also helps in the writing, because the more you know about what you're trying to do, I think the clearer your vision is. And if you have that during the writing time, I'll probably do a video later about the playlist, how I do that. But once you're in your composition time, when you're just hardcore writing, it's really good to have that music just pumping, and it influences your story, I think, to a great degree. But that's about all I have on the sort of reading list and these lists. My next video, I'm going to talk about beginning to organize, which is very important, because if you don't organize, you're not very efficient. So I will talk a bit about that. But that's about all I have for today. You can like and subscribe if you want to do that. If you know anyone that would benefit from this video, you can send that to them, share it with them. But that's about all I have. Take care. Have a good day.